There's an unfortunate trend going on in film discourse these days. Stop me if you've heard this one before.
Turnout was slightly softer than expected in the international box office with $195.
This film was a
markets bringing the global tally to 200.
Fantastic Four is a flop.
When and why did we all become armchair studio executives? Why are we tracking opening weekend domestic hauls like we're Bob Iger's unpaid interns? And most importantly, why are we crunching numbers instead of analyzing themes? I don't know, but my point is, we should probably stop. Cinephiles and filmgoers have always cared about box office performance to a degree, but in the pre-internet stone ages, they didn't have real-time access to the financial data like we do today. When films like Star Wars, Jaws, or Titanic shattered box office records, monetary success became part of the cultural conversation, but it didn't dominate the discourse. Big box office hauls were treated as capstones of monumental cinematic achievements, not ammunition for petty disputes between fanboys. For instance, Titanic superfans weren't dunking on Batman and Robin enjoyers because their movie succeeded while the other flopped. But nowadays, things are much bleaker. For reasons unknown, every terminally online cinephile has become a box office wonk, rigorously studying early tracking numbers, domestic versus international splits, production budgets measured against marketing spends, and blah 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 blah. And it would be fine if all that sweaty data intake was just for the love of the game, but it's not. Instead, it's used to reduce the art of cinema into a pedantic horse race where financial success matters more than aesthetic, narrative, or thematic success. Why? Like, literally, why are we doing this to ourselves? With the rise of real-time tracking sites like Box Office Mojo, box office data became readily available to the public, which was then amplified by media pundits and YouTube commentators and finally flowing downstream into film Twitter, devolving the discourse into a data-backed arms race between box office-brained cinesnobs. But any conversation about box office obsession would be incomplete without mentioning the MCU's landmark Infinity Saga, the franchise's unprecedented hot streak that was making billion-dollar icons out of D-list comic book characters on the regular. And by the time Infinity War and Endgame rolled around, Marvel wasn't just winning, it was dropping some of the most financially successful films of all time. Which, yeah, good for them, but evidently bad for us. Because Marvel's meteoric success in the 2010s set a high watermark for box office dominance that would prove to be impossible for anyone to replicate, even Marvel itself. But now that the bar was set so high, fans recalibrated their threshold for box office success to meet it. And as COVID hit, the streamers got bigger, the multiplexes got hammered, and MCU fatigue set in. Box office averages plummeted, but many fans still expected lightning to strike the same bottle twice. In other words, in the 2020s, billion-dollar movies do not grow on trees, but that hasn't stopped fans from believing they should. Which is where a lot of this toxicity around box office discourse stems from. A highly profitable franchise creating an unattainable benchmark that slowly became impossible to reach. And those who would rather treat cinema like a stock market crafted a narrative and ran with it, until even casual audience members began speaking their language and using their jargon. At its core, this box office obsession is a way to quantify a movie's value without ever contending with the text of the movie on its own terms. It's lazy, it's antithetical to cinema, and it bloats film discourse with rote statistics when it should be filled with nuanced discussion. And it's never been worse than it is right now. Our collective fixation on the box office has reached a fever pitch in recent weeks with the release of the DCU's inaugural film Superman and the MCU's 37th film, The Fantastic Four: First Steps. At the time of this recording, Superman just passed $550 million worldwide on a $225 million budget. Fantastic Four, which was dropped later in July, is sitting at $370 million on a budget of $200 million. And yes, those numbers do seem lackluster when stacked up against the superhero movie boom of the 2010s, but we're not in the 2010s anymore, and it's not just superhero films taking a financial hit. Romantic comedies, action movies, and even the once untouchable box office juggernaut genre of horror are all underperforming compared to pre-COVID numbers. Whether it's due to streaming, jacked up ticket prices, or waning audience interest, the barren box office landscape of the 2020s is almost completely unrecognizable from the powerhouse it was 10 years ago. Despite both films garnering a generally positive response from fans and critics alike, there's no denying the box office performance isn't as impressive as many fans expected. And those same fans have not shied away from making their opinion known on the subject. So much so, in fact, that the conversation around numbers, projections, and profit margins has begun to eclipse the far more important and productive conversation, the one that's actually about the films themselves. And sure, if you browse through film Twitter, you might see people talking about what Superman meant to them, but any talk about themes, narrative, or aesthetics is quickly drowned out by a chorus of anime avatar accounts parroting box office talking points about how the film must suck because it didn't make $1 billion. This relentless insistence on judging films solely on their profitability has flattened film discourse into an explicitly anti-art conversation, one that prioritizes monetary success over emotional resonance, and being marketable over being memorable. And none of this is to say that box office performance isn't important. It most certainly is. It's the main metric studios use to determine what gets greenlit for sequels and what gets the Eternals coded "let's all pretend this never happened" treatment. So yes, box office numbers are important, but unless you work for Disney or Warner Brothers, they're not important for you. So when you find yourself in a heated argument with Snyder Soldier 47 and you're rattling off box office statistics like fucking Jonah Hill and Moneyball, please try to remember, you're not on the payroll. You're not in the boardrooms. You don't make money when the film you like makes money, and you definitely don't lose money when it flops. Cinema is not a sport. It's not a competition. It's an art form. And if the film moved you, you win. And even if that film underperforms financially, that win doesn't get erased. It doesn't come with an asterisk. If you found value in it, it's valuable, even if the box office tells a different story. And look, I get it. On some level, we're hardwired to gamify and internalize the things we love by making them part of our identities. Loving a film or a franchise means wanting it to succeed and be seen, often in the hopes that others can feel what we felt the first time we saw it. And yes, box office numbers seem like the easiest way to track that success, to validate your taste, or even to prove that you're on the quote-unquote winning side. But the box office is not a scoreboard. It's not a definitive measure of quality by any means. If it was, Minions would be a better film than Blade Runner 2049. There's nothing wrong with caring about how your new favorite movie performs financially, but if you find yourself talking about the opening weekend domestic numbers more than the film itself, it might be worth it to ask yourself why you started loving movies in the first place. Was it because they took you to places you've never been and made you feel things you've never felt, or was it because it felt cool and epic to watch Titanic make $2 billion? Just some food for thought. So as always, thanks so much to everyone who made it this far. Like and subscribe for more content like this, and I'll catch y'all soon.